Daryl Recommends Podcasts is a podcast recommending series and should be mistaken as a reviewing one. Opinions about each show are my own and should not reflect what each podcast has to offer. Content warnings aside, I believe if any recommendation in my series interests you, you should give it a chance, regardless of how I personally feel about the show.
Appalachia. A word stolen from more than one language. It conjures images of the beauty of God's creation and the darkness of man's various poverties. The simpler way of life here bespeaks a time past of purity and piety, but turn over a stone. You'll find the underbelly of suspicion and clannishness. Folk who live here don't trust easy. There's whole graveyards full of what we've learned about outsiders. And before you judge us as backwood hillbillies or opioid-addicted rednecks, take a minute to understand how we got here. I mean how we really got here. There are places in this world that humanity was never supposed to see. Walled in by mountains of burning black rock, isolated by a choking canopy of poison
Set in
flora.
alternate Appalachia, Old Gods of Appalachia is a horror anthology about witches, darkness, and blood. Only ignorance is what made us think we could set our claims on these hills. Digging into them was only the first mistake. Old Gods of Appalachia was written by Steve Shell and Cam Collins and follows multiple storylines set in the early 20th century, with occasional breaks and one-shot stories set either closer to the present or farther in the past. It's currently 3 seasons long, with a 4th season on the way, and features returns of characters from previous seasons and storylines. And this is a show that is definitely 100% worth a listen if you are somebody who is into not only anthology horror, but folk horror. I adore this show so much. It was one of the first horror podcasts I listened to when I first got into listening to podcasts. It took me quite a bit of time to listen to it because, funny enough, this one was one that I had followed for like maybe a year or two before I actually listened to it. Reason for that was when I got into the SCP archives, I just saw it and I was like, oh, this looked interesting. And one of my other habits is if there's a podcast that I'm into, I follow their other social media accounts if I happen to come across them, even if I don't actually listen to the show. So I've seen Old Gods around for a while, but it took me a bit to actually listen to it. I think I caught up midway through season 2, which I'm really glad I did because I think season 2 has so far been my favorite season. I love all the characters in it, and just the characters in this show are great. Some of them are just complete assholes, some of them are just really cool, and this is like one of those shows that have multiple times gotten me like screaming and going yes, or going no, why would you do that, no. And I think if a show could get me to do that, it definitely has to be up there and like hey, you want a podcast? This is a show. Please listen to this show. And it's just Steve Shell has like the most beautiful narrating voice. His narration is just so good. He knows how to act. He knows how to narrate. And the other people that they get on the show are really good when they play the other characters. And like a majority of the show is Steve Shell narrating it, so that's why I'm singling him out of everybody. But like, I could listen to him narrate stuff all day. Narrate my life, please. Actually, please don't. That'd be weird. But yeah, no, I just, great show, great voice acting. Like, and they also get like a bunch of different people on it. They have like Yuri Lenthal, if you know Spider-Man. They got Corey Ryan Forrester, who I think I might have mentioned him during like when I was talking about Appalachia, but he's a comedian if you don't know him, and he's really good in this. And they got like other people too, and I'm just like, yes, good. And you might hear some other familiar voices from podcasting, but I don't want to mention who because how they're introduced was like really cool and I really liked it, but also I don't want to spoil anything. And this show just has like great characters. It's really funny because a lot of the main characters in the show are women and children, and I don't know what it is with Old Gods of Appalachia with how they write their female characters, but they do it so fucking good. So good. And just the way they covered certain topics in the show, like it's set in early 20th century. like the first season's like the 1910s, second is like the 1920s to 30s, and then the third season's like the 30s, and like one storyline that's set in the 40s. And so naturally, like with historical fiction, it's going to cover certain topics, but like one of the things that I don't like about historical fiction, and maybe it's just because of the historical fiction that I've been exposed to, it's not every single thing I've been exposed to, but it's also like an issue with fantasy as well, is like when, at least to me personally, when people do historical fiction, they tend to focus a lot on sexism and racism. Which, you know, if you're going to do historical fiction, especially with something set that's like early 20th century, and those are like, you know, civil rights movement and the feminist movement and all sorts of stuff. I know the civil rights movement was in the 1960s, but there's also like other stuff. I get that it gets brought up, but like I also like when I see a lot of historical fiction shows, the ones that I've been exposed to do that, they tend to just focus on that if those characters are brought in most of the time. And what I like with Old Gods of Appalachia is they don't shy away from those from the topics of like sexism and racism, but they don't go like, oh yeah, here's our black character, and all they're there for is so people could yell a slur at them, and that's it. And like the characters in this is so good, and listening to their Q&As and how they talk about trying to do representation as well as writing characters that they have nothing, like they're not like Steve Shell and Kim Collins are white, so writing characters who are not white and taking the time to make sure that they do it properly and respectfully, I think that's really nice that they're very open about talking about that. And also just, like, you know, if you want a show where it's just, like, a lot of the characters are lesbians, like, I could personally use with more podcasts with lots of lesbian characters because, you know, I'm gay. And that's just great. Like, the vibes of the show, like, even though it's, like, dark, gritty horror, for some reason, it's, like, to me, when listening to it, it feels like I don't get scared listening to it. It's, like, a warm campfire feeling. And, like, I think there was, like, one time where I actually did get jump scared in this podcast. I was listening to, like, it was during my very first listen, and I was listening to it while I used to walk to work. I used to walk to work at, like, 4:30 in the morning. It would be completely dark, and I was walking through crossing the road, and there was, like, one of the early episodes where they have a, mine explosion sound effect, but the way they do it is they have it, like, soft and then gradually get bigger. And I thought a car was about to hit me. So that was, like, the only time I ever jumped while listening to this podcast. But that was for, like, it was, like, not for reasons that had nothing to do with the podcast other than the, you know, I think you get what I'm talking about. But yeah, the show just feels like hearing a scary story by the campfire, and it's just warm and nice. And it's like the horrors are terrifying, but it make you feel fuzzy inside. And I really like that. And also just, like, talking about just anti-capitalism, pro-labor union movements. Just, this show is so good. I don't know what it is, but, like, the Second Industrial Revolution is, like, one of my favorite time periods of history I like learning about. So I don't know why, but it just is. So, like, having a podcast that's, like, everything in it right now is, like, mostly set in that time period. It's just, it's beautiful. It's great. I love it. And I'm incredibly excited for season 4, tying back into the voice acting part of this whole recommendation of just, like, I'm so excited for season 4. I want to know what they do for season 4. The ending of season 3 had me screaming. I want to know what happens in season 4. And this video is probably going to age so badly when season 4 comes out. And I'm so excited for it. And then people be like, so have you listened to it yet? Season 4 is out. Have you listened to it yet? I'd be like, yes! That was 6 years ago. Leave me alone. Look at the date the video came out. And yeah, but either way, I adore the show a lot. It is a horror podcast. Like, I can't tell you, it's a horror podcast. Look at the general content warnings. If you don't like gore or body horror, if you don't like children in dangerous situations, maybe this isn't the show for you. At this point, you know I recommend a lot of horror podcasts, and I am broadening my horizons, but I'm just letting you know, don't be upset because it's horror. It's very fuzzy feeling podcast, but there's horrible things that happen into it. And I adore the show so much. I love it a lot. I like listening to it. And I hope other people will start listening to it. It's pretty well known. They're doing like a live tour around the time that I recorded this, and I wish I could have gone, but I am also a poor college student, so that's something I can't do, sadly. But maybe someday in the future. So I'm going to link their Patreon down below. I highly recommend you donate to it if you want, because they do have Patreon exclusive stories on there. I think they just started a third one. I don't know if it's a third one. I actually don't know how many they have on there. I can think of like 2, but I can't think of any other ones. So, you know, if you want a cool podcast and you want some nice side stories to go on top of that, donate to our Patreon, go listen to those. And as always, if you have a show that you want me to go check out, just leave a message down below. Let me know what you want me to listen to. I may have already listened to it and just not recommended it yet. I could add it on my list. It could already be on my list. I have almost 200 podcasts on my bookmarks, and I haven't even gone through 50 of them. So yeah, you know, maybe you should go and give me more. Yeah, and that's it. My socials are also linked down below, so if you want to go follow me on other social media websites, you could go do that. And I hope you have a good day. Goodbye, and I will be coming out with another one of these videos in the future. Bye.